Krásný a příjemný podvečer nebo dobrý večer tady u nás v Malém Merinu. Jsem moc ráda, že jsme se tady potkali v tak hojném počtu, ale na druhou stranu mě to vůbec neudivuje, protože to téma dneska je, včetně těch hostů, velice zajímavé. Jenom trošku na začátku něco technického, kdo by potřeboval překlad simultánní, tak vepředu jsou tam sluchátka, tak kdo si nevzal, tak ještě může. A jinak své hosty dneska představí moje kolegyně Táňa Klementová, která celý ten večer zosnovala. Děkuji.
Já udělám zdravící česky. I will speak in Czech at the beginning, but just at the beginning. Yes.
Oh, no, you know what, that's probably going to confuse me. It's fine.
She understands fluently. She's
Yeah.
from Wednesday here.
Exactly.
Nearly a week.
Definitely
Nearly a week.
Já vás tady všechny srdečně vítám. Jestli jsme slyšet vzadu. Jo. Je to dobrý, nebo máme si použít mikrofon? Ať vás... Tak.
Not necessary.
Not necessary. Ještě jedno srdečné přivítání. Děkuji za trpělivost se začátkem. A já trošku vysvětlím, jak to bude pojato a pak už je to na vás hodně. Já tady budu jako v roli moderátorky a trochu hostitelky a proto jsem přišla jako poslední, aby to všichni připravili už za mě. A naše hosty a vzácné ženy představovat asi úplně nějak dlouhosáhle nemusím. Budeme si vyprávět ve trojici, v angličtině, ale je to vymyšleno tak, aby zůstala i nějaká plocha pro vás. Takže pokud jste sem přišli s otázkami, tak je držte v paměti a ona přijde její doba. Já asi přepnu na tu angličtinu. Okay, I will switch to English.
Okay.
We met yesterday for a dinner together. And we decided to start with Karen Kruger because Eva Lustigová is more often here.
Every other week.
Both of them are very precious, and then there are some more 20 or 30 precious people here as well. And I would like to introduce Karen first because she has a straight link to Brno, and we meet now in Brno. Her grandparents, Turkles, they lived here. They spent a main part of their lives here, and her mother was here and other relatives. And she created a movie, Letters from Brno, which maybe we can start with the trailer, not the whole movie. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then we will start the discussion. Our second guest, Eva Lustigová, daughter of Arnošta Lustiga and Věry Weislitzové, is our second. It's really strange. I will not use the numbers today.
But second is just fine.
Is our very, very warmly welcome.
Thank you.
Woman here, very inspiring, and she is going to present tomorrow a new book, Arnoštova cesta, Arnošt's journey. Mm-hmm. Maybe she will show it today a bit or not, finally.
Well, the supplies didn't come through until tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow is the day, So today we can only speak about it, and tomorrow you can see it. It's like with Christmas, we can speak about the presents, but you will get it the next evening. And I would also like to show you a part of her movie, documentary movie she made with Arnošta Lustiga. And it's also important part of her way, how she deals with the family story and the family heritage, because that's the main topic of our event. Family heritage, how we keep it, how we deal with it, how they deal with it in their lives. So that's the introduction. Let's pray. It will work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Today you see my trailer. Did I send it? I never sent it.
This is Dylan, my technical help aid, and you be.
I'm the producer. It's not public.
The movie Letters from Brno was screened in September in Brno. So maybe some of you, and I know that some of you saw the movie, and there will be probably a possibility in the future to make another screening, but today we will only show a trailer. Yeah? Okay, I don't have the sound.
You might want to pause.
Yes. Any suggestions?
Oh, yeah.
Světla?
Světla is fine. I needed the sound, and that is this wire. So I'm afraid this will not work. Okay.
Just comes to the rescue.
Yeah.
Maybe the
He's a
whole
tech-
audience can join us and help to fix this. Maybe možná v tom nastavení ještě bych to... Ano, ano. Yes, yes, okay. Teď už je všechno? Musíme ještě... Ano, je to úplně jako na maximum.
Ne, bude v pořádku.
Input jsou. Okay.
Připojen na webu. Na ta televize možná vůbec reproduktor nemá.
We already used it with the sound.
Někdy to mluvilo?
Yeah, používali jsme to se zvukem.
Ta televize někdy mluvila?
Wouldn't it be easier to just put this one? I got it here.
Ne, to se počkání nevyřeší.
Táňo,
Ano.
Karen has a suggestion.
Yes.
I have it on this external hard drive, and I think it might be easier to play
Okay.
than from the website. Especially if you're having any.
Connection.
Yeah.
Connectivity issues.
Let's try that.
Okay.
But I will probably ask Martin if he can come. We can talk.
Okay, sure.
Pan Jáša je teda podle mě mnohem hodnější adept. Já vím, že to televize mluvila.
Oh, shit. No, that's the trailer, right?
It is.
So you're going to have a new trailer also for...
Yeah.
But you're going to do the incorporate the letters?
No, we're not doing trailer.
Okay.
No, because it.
Because with the public tour works well.
Yeah, and yeah, I know.
No, I get it.
We had to
Je to název
30-second
z webové stránky,
for people.
tak jestli máme
Yeah.
prohlížet články
Wow.
na té
Yeah.
televizi, tak to můžu
Seconds.
pustit.
The editor did it.
Ale
It's
ne,
fine.
to je z mého počítače.
In that 30 seconds?
No,
co
it's
jak to nefunguje, je
this is
From this
one.
one.
Yeah, this is 156, and so he just
Yeah,
put
on
together
the...
30.
Počítači je vůbec nastavení nějaké sítost?
No to je, to teďka dělá, to co teď dělá.
To je počítač.
He's doing
Dáme tomu pár chvílek.
Vypadá to na věku.
Už.
But it's very low. Is it just coming through your computer?
It's my computer sound.
Yeah, but I want them to start over too. They're at the end of it.
V tomto případě, že i v tom mluví, paní
It's a snapshot of kind of how
I know.
Historical events are unfolding for a small family.
Tak může být něco.
Okay, but
Ten náš mikrofon, že si k tomu složil,
Oh, if you put the mic in. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
for the first time, be patient.
Jsem si zapal tam ještě.
Ano.
Bluetooth mode.
Bluetooth. Oh, that's fun. Can you hit the lights?
Můžeme zasnout světla? Can we put off the lights?
Can you start it over, Tana?
I wonder if this is like a list of everything that you chose.
Can you restart it? No.
40 plus years
Oh, yeah.
when I found out that my mother was Jewish and wondered, what had happened to her. I just asked, what is your religion? My mother, I think, said, you don't ever ask anybody that question. We discovered
Can you just pause it for a moment, Tana?
Yes.
Thank you. And let's just, thank you.
As the sound is wrong and the back rows, they do not hear it well.
Yeah.
So I suggest to speak more and wait if it will be better, if my colleague can fix it.
To speak in the meantime, you mean?
Yeah, I can speak in
Start the
meantime,
conversation, and then when he
sure.
gets it,
Yeah,
we'll go to the
do
film.
not use the
I
time.
guess, but I just think it's distracting to probably be showing it while,
Okay.
yeah. So we can certainly talk. Maybe is it possible for him to just do it get it right on the computer, then come and hook up to the TV?
We can, but you hear the sound is very low
Yeah.
from the computer. That's the problem. So it will not be better. It's about the sound.
Okay.
Yeah. I will leave it up to my colleague because I won't be helpful in that now.
Okay.
Please do not fall asleep
Yeah.
as the lights are off, but let's keep it like that. It's more intimate. And as Karen came to Brno for the second time from September, is it your second visit here, or
No.
you've been here earlier?
Yes. The first time I was here was in 2005, when there was a symposium to honor one of my mother's cousins, George Placzek. And let's see, the second time, it was very, very short. I was actually delivering footage in an interview of someone from the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, New Jersey, who had been a graduate student of George Placzek, and I went and interviewed him, and it was filmed, and so I was delivering that, but I was only here for maybe 2 hours, and then was back in Prague, and then the next time was. No, actually, that was that was 2019. That was the same year that I was here for 6 weeks. And then the next time I was back was for the Städelfest last August, end of August, beginning of September.
And can you shortly introduce who was Georg Placzek to you?
Well, George Placzek was a cousin of my mother's. So is that a second cousin or a cousin once removed? I don't know. And he was a famous physicist who worked with Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer just won the Oscar. I know.
Really?
Yeah,
Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. And the film Oppenheimer just won the Oscar for Best Picture, and I think Best Director, Best Actor, all kinds of things. And George Plachek worked with Oppenheimer in Los Alamos and with the Manhattan Project. And he ended up, it's such a long story, but
No.
I won't go into it. But that he is a relative. He is a Plachek of this Plachek line, and then Rabbi Baruch Plachek, who is the son of Abraham, Rabbi Abraham Plachek. These are also like my great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather. And I didn't discover all of this until, oh my goodness. When I was in college, I didn't know my mother was Jewish. She hid her past completely. And so did her younger sister, Daisy. Sorry, I'm glad it's not showing because it's very distracting for me, to even out of the peripheral vision, seeing the trailer going.
Si vlastně ruší.
Karen to trochu ruší s tím. He wants to give one last try to fix it.
Okay, and you don't want to try the external hard drive?
No.
Oh, Netflix. I'm not going to look in that direction.
Netflix
Yes.
today.
Did I answer your question?
It was partly, and I wanted to stress the name Plachek. That's why I asked about George. Now there was Oppenheimer mentioned.
Yes.
We can hardly do better advertisement to your presence here.
Yeah.
Now, so the name Plachek is very familiar to us, I think, to our audience today, and Baruch Plachek, of course, as the land rabbi, Moravian land rabbi. So Karen has a deep, important roots, but each story is important. I just wanted to find one word which we know, everybody here, and that's the Plachek roots.
Yeah.
And she already said she didn't know completely the family story.
Yeah.
Until when?
Well, I found out my mother was Jewish when I was a freshman in college, and it was a relative who told me. And my mother, he couldn't see that my mother was standing. His back was to my mother. Pretend this is the threshold to the kitchen. And Hans, this great uncle of mine, was facing me, and he was asking about this. I don't know. There was light. I was dating a Jewish guy at the University of Michigan. We had already broken up. We didn't even last 3 months. And so Hans had heard about this romance and said, "So what happened to Steven Seagal?" And I was being flippant and said, well, we broke up. I guess I wasn't Jewish enough for him. And Hans looked at me and said, "You have more royal Jewish blood in your little finger than Steven Seagal has coursing through his whole body. Don't you know who your great-grandfather was?" I didn't have any grandparents. I didn't know who my grandfather was, let alone this great. And I saw my mother, and I saw that she was listening. And Hans's back was to her. He didn't see her. And she looked so angry. And the first thing I thought was, wow, she's Jewish? And the second thing I thought was, why is she so angry that I'm hearing this? And I'm sure people have asked, well, didn't you talk to her and try to... My mother wouldn't speak about her past, and she would change the subject if we tried to ask about it. And I'm sure she said something to Hans, like, don't talk about my family or my past with my children, because he never brought it up again. But that was the point. I describe it almost like a light switch going off of insatiable curiosity. You know, what happened to her that she won't talk about her past? And now I find out she's Jewish, her family's, there's a rabbi, you know, and why won't she talk about this? And so that's when it started. And it only took about 45 years for me to put the puzzle together. And I tried to interview relatives who were alive, and some would talk about it, but I felt like they knew that my mother wasn't saying anything, and so they didn't answer all the questions I had. But that's when I started learning, and you know, and it was in when Hans died in 2004, my mother and I had to go clean out their New York City apartment. And there was a very long hallway with floor-to-ceiling closets. And that's when we found all these letters and photographs and documents that my mother had never seen before. And she went from, look at all of this, to what do we do with all of this? And when she saw the photographs, she was saying, why didn't they show these to me? And I actually have some of them because, Tanya, you asked me to bring them. And, you know, photographs like this, you know, from her childhood that she had never seen before. She only had, a few pictures of her parents, like maybe 2 or 3. And so she saw all of these and she was so angry that they had kept, all of this from her. But we had to pack it all up and she wouldn't let me touch it. And I didn't see them again really until after my mom died in 2014. And my sister found that she had hid everything under her bed. And I did bring, these are, when I go to schools here in the Czech Republic, the students are fascinated with looking at, these letters from my mom. These were also all in the New York stuff, and they're in German, they're in Czech. It's before she was put on the Kindertransport. And I didn't even know about the Kindertransport and Nicholas Winton until 2005, when the symposium was happening here, because some researchers contacted me and said, did you know that your mother and your aunt were Kindertransports? I didn't know what that was. And they said their names are on a list. It's like Schindler's List, but it's Winton's list. And Nicholas Winton, set up I'm sure everyone here knows who Nicholas Winton is. Yeah.
Sure.
And what about Anthony Hopkins? Yes, because Anthony Hopkins is playing Nicholas Winton, and the film's coming out on the 14th. It's called One Life, and so a lot of people in the U.S. now know what the Kindertransport is because Anthony Hopkins is playing Nicholas Winton, so it's like, oh, I know what that is. But before, not very many people did. So that gives a bit of a timeline of when I started finding things out.
Yeah, and one reason why I chose these 2 guests is that Karen's story and her knowledge about her family roots was discovered so late, or later, than in case of Eva Lustigová, who was raised with all this background around her for all of her life. And before we go back to that painful topic, it will be a little taboo for today, okay? The trailers. I would also like to give you some questions at the beginning. In your case, you already knew since you were born who you are, who were your parents. What about your grandparents? Did you have any idea who they were? Was it communicated in your family?
Yeah, I knew I didn't have grandparents. I had only one grandmother, that was my paternal grandmother. And so I grew up knowing that all of them were murdered during the Holocaust. And the parents of a dear friend of my father's, Ota Pavel, his father whose Jewish name was Leo Popper, said to me and my brother when we were, I remember maybe I was 5, he said, "We will be your grandparents because you don't have any." Ota Pavel was this fantastic classic writer, a close friend of my father's. So
He became a surrogate.
Yeah.
And concerning letters, there is a very nice book published of their letters, Arnošta and Pavel letters.
yes, well, I dreamt up this book. It's called Krásně jsem si početl. I thoroughly enjoyed reading, is the title of this book, and it's basically letters from Ota Pavel to my family and Arnošt, but it was to the whole family when we immigrated to Israel in 1968 until 1973, when at that point we were already in Iowa City. But in 1973, Ota Pavel died. He had schizophrenia, which was passed on to him from his father and his family illness. So it ended. But in this book are also letters from my grandmother and my father's sister to us, and vice versa, except that my father's letters to his friend Ota to Czechoslovakia were somehow stolen or confiscated. So in the book, there's only one side. So I had taken text that my father had written about Ota Pavel in another book, which is called Moments with Ota Pavel, Okamžiky s Otou Pavlem. So they were actually mirroring, they were having a conversation because there was so much to work from. So there were lots of letters. Yeah, we made up some, but and pictures.
And the word letters or letter is very often used today. And there will be an exhibition soon this year about this phenomenon. How can we try to understand Holocaust better through the letters that were written? And in both of your life stories, this phenomenon is very important. Karen finally made a movie with Jeff.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce him?
Jeffrey Gary is the director and cinematographer for the film, and he's the reason there is a film. I never intended to make a film. I was going to write a book, and he's the reason I'm here. We're here with the film.
In your case, you could partly understand better your family, their behavior, maybe also who they were, through the letters you discovered so late.
Yeah.
How long time was since you discovered the letters until you made the movie?
Well, they were discovered in 2004, but my mom wouldn't let me touch them. And it wasn't until after she died 2014 that I got all of them. But I was working as a school administrator, and our school went year round, and so I didn't have the time to even look through all of this. There were hundreds of pages of letters and documents and photographs, and it was so overwhelming. I'd like open the box and then close it up and say, I can't deal with this right now. I didn't know what it was. It was in Czech and German, and so it wasn't until 2019 when I decided to take 3 months off to come here, find someone to help with translations of, the Czech and of the German, that I started discovering who my grandparents were and what they went through, and putting their, 2 beloved daughters on this train, and then not hearing from them, at different points. And my grandfather's name was Armin, and my grandmother was Herta, and in some of their, in some of the letters there, you can hear and feel their anguish and their worry about, Armin even says, I hope it doesn't turn out that we made a mistake in sending him away, because he hadn't heard from them and he didn't know where they were. And I think any of us who are parents, you can really appreciate how difficult that must have been, where you're hoping you're doing the best thing and then wondering if you did. And people ask, they were 8, my mother was 10 and their little sister was 8 when they were put on the train. And so they were old enough to remember and be very traumatized. And they both did not tell any of their family when they came to the U.S. And got married and had children. My cousins also knew nothing about their mother, nothing, and didn't have grandparents either. And so when I was able to share this information with my cousins, they were really happy because they said, you've given us the biggest gift of knowing who our mother was, as a child, because we knew nothing, and we've been very close, ever since.
So it was a long path.
Yeah.
to create the movie finally. I mean.
Yeah. Well, when we started filming, and after I came back in 2019, only I think Jeff wasn't intending to make a film. He just said, can I put you in front of a camera and ask you some questions, and while it's fresh in your mind, and this will help you with your book. And I was still a school administrator, so it was like, how's that going to help me with my book? But
he knew better.
He did. And also what I learned was I've never been in a film. I've never been interviewed or filmed or anything. But what I learned was I could tell the story faster than I could write it. And it was at the end of the second interview that he said, I know you don't want to hear this, but this is a film. And I thought, well, what a horrible film. If I just sit in a chair and read letters, which is how that's why I'm not a filmmaker. Because I think with words, and I think of a book. And thank goodness he had a very different vision. And that's how it turned out the way that it finally did.
Thank you.
Wow,
Eva.
it's amazing. It's an amazing story, and so nice that you had that idea.
And it still continues. So, Eva also made a movie. Are you a filmmaker?
Now I am.
I actually.
And I'll tell you why I answered that. Because Arnošta, my father, used to say that you are what you do. You write a book, you're a writer. You make a film, you're a filmmaker. So, that's that. It's very easy.
I would sign that. Correct. And what was your motivation for the movie you made with your father?
It was actually to capture my father in his last years of his life after he got the diagnosis that he had lymphoma. And that was in the summer of 2006. And of course, I grew up in a home with lots of filmmakers and artists and writers and, just painters, all kinds of fun people used to come home, no matter what country we lived in. And so I was exposed to a lot of stuff about films and art and literature. And even though I avoided taking any of my father's courses at the university, because where he taught screenplay writing and creative writing and film and literature and Holocaust in film and literature, I avoided all of that because I wanted to find my own way. And in fact, I just thought, I want to do what I want to do. And so I ended up studying cultural anthropology. And then I got an MBA in international human resources. But you cannot avoid your life. You cannot avoid your your path or your fate. And so, of course, I went back to this. And so when he had the diagnosis of a terminal illness, I thought, I want to capture him the way he is. And we're going to have a film, and we're going to talk about the things that are important in our lives, what was important in our family. And so that's the film. It was just for me to have him the way I wanted. I was very selfish. In fact, I made the film for myself. But with the best crew. I had a fantastic cameraman and film editor and sound man and light man. And they were all men. In fact, that's what I learned also about the film industry, that it's primarily masculine. I started making the film in 2006. I don't know, and we had a premiere at the International Film Festival in Karlovy Vary, and I don't know how much has changed since then, but I'm getting ready to make the second part of this film because I've got fantastic footage. And so that's a big project. And you're getting ready to make your second film, aren't you?
I'm not, no, that's his. I'm not involved in that. The Auschwitz album? No.
Yeah,
no.
But you're not involved in that?
No.
Okay. Well, you might want to reconsider because it's a bit addictive.
Oh, no.
It's very addictive, okay?
A bit, because it's another art form. It's another way of communicating what you have in your heart and in your blood and in your head. And it's a beautiful way to get in touch with who you are and with what you want to share.
Yesterday, when we had the dinner, we opened a discussion. How does it influence you to make such a kind of piece of work, movie, book, etc.? So, is Karen Kruger different to Karen Kruger, previous Karen Kruger, after creating this with Jeff?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The short answer. Yes. I was telling the students at, help me with pronunciation.
Biskupské gymnázium.
Yes, that's where I was this morning. And we were talking about identity. And I said, I do identify as a Jew, that I'm Jewish. And I didn't at the start of this. It was, I knew under, Jewish law, because my mother was Jewish, I'm Jewish, but I didn't embrace that identity at the beginning of this, but I have now. And, through this process and understanding more about who my relatives were, I've learned a lot about who, Rabbi Baruch Plachek was, and in some ways, I identify with some of his, I think, rebel nature. That I don't know if it probably might be known that he was friends with Gregory Mendel, and when Mendel died, he continued his experiments, and he wrote to Darwin about it. And so here's this rabbi who the BBC called him a closet evolutionist, and he's writing to Darwin about Mendel's work, and Darwin's response was, "This is too mathematical for me, not interested." But so here is this rabbi whose most famous and most popular sermon was, "God is an evolutionist." So. Within a Orthodox Jewish community, that even the title of that, when I read that, and I just thought, sounds like me. Doing something and talking about something and believing something that might be very different from what the congregation believes. However, I was told that was his most popular sermon. And learning more about him, and even his father, Abraham Plachek, is fascinating to me. It really is. And other people, Leo Beck is one of our relatives too, and I didn't know. I knew almost nothing about him, and so I continue learning, and it has changed my identity.
Leo Beck, the German rabbi?
Yes.
Okay, so he was, in fact, in the concentration camp
Yes.
with my father, and they
Oh.
used to sweep the street together.
Yes,
I knew we were related.
I know,
one way or another.
Yeah, we think we are related.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering what else can I add? Probably nothing to this kind of stories. It's really difficult.
That's okay. Well, never mind. Let's just keep talking. Keep asking the right questions, because who knows what we'll come up with at the end.
We will discover an entire new topics. And Eva yesterday replied, I would also like to answer a question like that, which I loved, because there is your space.
Thank you. So, are there two Evas? One before and one after?
Yeah.
There are probably many more, but
Go on.
definitely there was an Eva before I started thinking about the film, because it's a very different way of thinking, not only your thoughts but also about yourself. So, in a way, my brother was going in the footsteps of his father, at least. He got 2 degrees in filmmaking, 2 masters, one in film making and one in film theory from universities in the US, NYU, an American university. And then after the Velvet Revolution, he got a doctorate in the famous FAMU school. Also in film. So my brother was, an established filmmaker, and here I'm the younger sister, and all of a sudden I'm opening the door and I have no formal background. I'm just a little crazy, and I know what I want, and I'm passionate about it, and it has to be. And so that's the new Eva. I mean, in the sense that I was able to say, okay, I have a vision, and now I'm going to implement it, and that's that. And the second Eva has actually been a little problematic, not for me, and not even for my family. My Indian husband and my 2 kids who look like they're Roma kids, and they go through a lot of discrimination when they're in this country, because this country is still quite insular, and anyone who's darker than you and I, and you might have already had some looks at you, but you're so tall. My husband comes to here, so he's very small, and the height also has a lot to do with it. But it's not the friendliest of places. So that family is quite pleased with me going in this direction. But my brother is a bit resentful that I have gotten on his territory, because he liked me in the box of an international health specialist who worked for, close to 40 years in international health in developing countries. I worked in sexual and reproductive health. I worked in family planning. I worked in, Egypt and Philippines and, Jamaica, all kinds of places. Brazil, Vietnam. I used to go to condom factories because I was into safer sex at the time when HIV pandemic started. So he still likes me in that box. He has not been able to accept or integrate the fact that there's another Eva. And I love international health. I think health is a building block of life. If we don't have our health, nothing else can happen. Forget the visions. You don't have the capacity. I love health, and I love the arts and film, and here I am.
Can I ask you a question?
Thank you for coming.
I know I want to
Thank you for inviting me.
What, first of all, has your brother seen the film?
Yes.
And what did he think of it?
I'll tell you, throughout, I was making the film for over a number of years because I was working more than full-time for the World Health Organization in Geneva. So I used to come here on weekend, on my vacations, to film, okay, with the Czech crew. And he used to give me a lot of textbooks. He said, oh, do this and do that. And he's also teaching film production. In fact, he's more of a teacher than a filmmaker because he hasn't made many more films than I have. But he understands, film, and he knows everything. He's like a walking encyclopedia. He's also a historian, so he'll tell you everything about anything dealing with the Holocaust and many other things. So he used to give me all these books. And you know what? Yes, I did look at some of them, and they had some great tips. But I knew what I wanted to communicate, and I had a great team. So I prepared the questions ahead of time to shoot in each location. And then my father didn't even want to know the questions. He said, don't give me the questions because the conversation is authentic. If I don't know the questions anyway, he could answer anything, anytime, even in his sleep. So that was no issue. But then when I had gone through 3 different editors until I found the right one, which is Jiří Brožek, who is the 9-time winner of the top award in film editing in the Czech Republic, called Český lev, the Czech lion. His name is Jiří Brožek. He's an artist. He's like, he taught me everything about film, if you want to know the truth. It wasn't in the books. It was from Jiří Brožek, who was very strict with me. He wouldn't always agree with me, and that was great. We fought and we almost killed each other many times. And that's the creative process, right? You need a dialogue, you need to fight, you need to love, you just go through the creative process. Okay, so then we came to the hospital, because I want to tell you, you asked me what he thought of the film.
Yes, yeah.
I'm
also interested in it.
Okay, sorry, you're the moderator, so I go back to you, but yes, you did. So there is my father fighting lymphoma for 5.5 years, which is much, much longer than the normal time that people live with it. But as doctors say, Holocaust survivors and survivors of other trauma survive longer with illness because they know how to fight for their life, because they've been almost on the other side. So he fought, and he was amazing. He'd sometime after chemo, he'd, leave the hospital and travel to open the Czech Expo in Shanghai. Even in 2010, he died a few months after in 2011. So he just wanted to live. He needed to live. Okay, so there he is, really on that deathbed. I hate to say that. He died 13 years ago in February. And I'm bringing a portable DVD player. And my brother is on one side, and I'm on the other, and there is Arnošt with this portable light. It's a light machine. And it was the last intellectual activity of his life because, it was 2 weeks before he died. And so he was watching it, and about halfway through it, he said, I have a headache. And he never complained. He never said anything. Nothing hurt. He was always like perfect. He was always hungry, but he was well. Even when he was like completely unwell, he was like, nothing happening there. So he developed a headache, and I said, okay, let's stop the film. Okay, so we stopped the film. Pepe, my brother, had to go for a bio break, okay? And so my father's last words to me in my life and his life were, if the second half of the film is as good as the first half, we have scored another goal, because he was a passionate soccer player. Even in Theresienstadt, he was with a team. And then he said something that I do not want to repeat to the public. But what I told him was, or in public, what I told him when he said that was that, oh, Pepe, Pepe doesn't think, he thinks I should do this or that. And he said, forget it, you're the artist in the family. Yeah. Hey, what can I say? So thank you for that question. I wasn't going to talk about it, but you asked, so I answered.
Yeah. Part of the reason I asked you is...
He said some other things, but this is all on this.
No, that's excellent and priceless.
Yeah.
But in the process of making this film, my siblings willingly participated. It was shot during the pandemic, and it was Jeff's idea to actually send cameras, lights, microphones with video instructions, and then he was interviewing through FaceTime, if you can imagine. And so they were fine participating, and I really think they thought, yeah, Karen's making a movie. This will never be finished.
So this is exactly my brother. She's making a film. What does she know about it?
Exactly. And so I thought they probably thought, my siblings probably thought, oh, sure, we'll go along with this. It will never happen, and she'll never finish it. And I think they were very shocked when I did. And then when it started winning awards and being shown, I heard from my older sister that my younger sister, my younger brother were not happy about this. And they didn't want to tell me directly, but they felt like I was betraying our mother by disclosing a past that she had fought to hide for most of her life. And so they didn't like the idea that it was out there. And I kept inviting them to come to a screening to see how the audience responds, because I thought it might help them understand it's bigger than that. It's bigger than telling the story. And they wouldn't come. They wouldn't come to any screenings for like the first year, but then they did finally come together to the biggest premiere we had in Los Angeles. And then afterward, separately, they said to me, changed my mind. I get it. I understand I understand what you're saying, what you're trying to do, and they've been supportive. But that was part of the reason I asked too, because I was surprised and very hurt when I heard that they were not happy that it was being seen by the public.
So, you know what? When we had the premiere at the festival in Karlovy Vary, which is one of the largest in Europe, my brother came almost like right before we started. Almost the lights went off after all the introductions, where I had Jiří Menzel there and other of his friends, because I wanted to connect that. In fact, Jiří Menzel is also in the film. And he came in tennis shoes and shorts. And I thought, Karlovy Vary is sort of a, people wear their best. They're overdressed, clearly. But it's not like you're going to a soccer match. So that's all.
Yeah, that's a message. Yeah.
It's not only about the movies today.
No, too bad.
There is a lot of more work. And in Karen's case, a big topic, I think, in her dealing with the family heritage is education. Also in Eva's, but you came to Czech Republic now to make a set of workshop, screening the movie, doing discussions with students, and what I find most interesting, you brought the originals also here. As you see, she's a teacher every second of her life. And why is it so important, education, for you? Why do you work with that story in this way?
I self-identify as Jewish, but also as an educator. And even though I never planned on making a film, once I knew that was going to happen, I was immediately picturing, okay, I'm going to show this in schools, and this is going to be part of a curriculum. And so I was thinking, in that direction. And that was, and it still is, a very big goal of mine. I think that in the United States, Holocaust education is pretty horrible if it happens. And the students, these high school students, especially here in these last few days, I've been in 3 different high schools here in Brno. And I also was with college students in Berlin for 3 days, and then university students outside of London. But I felt such a connection here with the students, and when I would tell them about what happens in the United States, and I would, see their faces, and they're so shocked, and they would even say, "Really? In America, is it really possible that you can graduate from high school, go to Harvard, go to a very prestigious university and know nothing about the Holocaust?" And it's absolutely possible. And it's getting worse. I won't go into the political climate right now, but it's definitely worse. And I will speak to the rising anti-Semitism that has increased like 600% in the United States since October 7th. And what is especially troubling is what's happening on a lot of campuses where Jewish students are no longer feeling even safe enough to go to classes because of the protests and the violence and the hatred. And it's very concerning. For me personally, as an educator who has, since I knew this was going to be a film and I knew it was going to be a curriculum, I've been really researching what is out there in terms of Holocaust education. And I actually went to Yad Vashem. Do people know what Yad Vashem is? Yeah. And it's funny, students knew that too. A lot of, of course, American students don't know what it is unless they're Jewish. But and Berlin students had no idea what Yad Vashem was. They do international Holocaust education training, and so I went to participate in this as an educator, and they did use the film as part of the course, with as an example of how you can teach the Holocaust using film. And it was there that people from the Department of Education at Yad Vashem asked if I would partner with them to create this curriculum. And their vision for it is much bigger than what mine was. And they also want to use all the letters. They want to use the whole archive. I did meet with a curator at Yad Vashem. I brought only a few binders. And just like at the Jewish Museum of Prague, just like the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C., everyone says the same thing. They've never seen anything like this. And from a family in the Czech Republic, they say, from a well-known family, but this much information, they've never seen anything like this. And then I say yes, and I take it to schools, and the curators all say the same thing. You don't take the originals, you make copies, right? And I said, no, I take the originals to schools. It's also why I'm not a curator. But I know as an educator the power of students having access to primary sources that they normally would not even see except in a museum and probably behind glass. And so I see what the impact is, and it's worth it. They're also very respectful. I've never, I've shown this in more than probably 2,500 students. I've never had any student do what an adult did, which is why I don't take these to film screenings, because I did once and only had a few things out, and I had said during the Q&A, it wasn't here. Yes, I actually brought some of the letters. You can see them. They're on a display table. Please do not touch them. These are actually originals. And then I came out and I saw a woman looking at them, and she had pulled one of the letters, out of the sheet. here, let me take this out, and was holding, you know what I mean? And I said, what are you doing? And she said, I couldn't see it in the plastic, and almost angry with me because I was saying, like, you're not supposed to be touching it. But after that happened, I don't bring them to screenings with adults, but students are incredibly respectful, and even some of the teachers today said that they thanked me, you know, for bringing all this, and they said, you are right about the effect of primary sources. We don't see it, you know. We see so much online, you know, or textbooks or videos or something, but to actually see this stuff is it. I think, and I hope it has a very lasting effect.
Yeah, it's not about the physical thing. It's more about the mental thing. For me. So I completely understand.
Yeah.
Although I'm curator.
Yeah.
And she has so many letters. And it's completely different power. It has completely different power.
It does.
Eva also she for her education is also a very important part of her activities while developing thoughts of her father. And could you please introduce a bit the work you do with the foundation?
Thank you. So our foundation has all the faces that Arnošta had. So it has a literary face, a film face, a pedagogic face, and a humanist, which is the red thread through all of it. And he taught at the university in Washington, D.C., the American University, and other universities as well, including the Hebrew University, summer school, and also at universities in Iowa before we moved to Washington, D.C. And he said that teaching might have been the most important thing he had ever done to connect with the new generation, with the young generation, and to let them understand that they are in charge of their own decision making. And if someone were to tell, he wanted them to understand that if someone were to tell them, go pack up your 50 kilos, in 3 days go to this place, and then on to Praha Bubny, you will know better. You will decide, no, I will not going, I'm not going. So the whole point was to make his students as people stronger, not to feel pity. He wasn't into that. He was into understanding how to say no. So, he was an activist. There was so much learning to be drawn from that experience. He posed 3 questions that we work with also in our educational programs. We develop teachers' guides. We train teachers starting from 9th grade. I started doing some work at the university now, as you know, last week. And then we work with his literary work, whether it's a short story that we take apart and then put it back together and look at what the meaning of it was. So we're doing literary workshops, but we're also teaching about values, about humanistic values, universal human values. 3 questions, I'll go back to the 3 questions to end. He was the honorary chair of the Franz Kafka Society for, more than 20 years. And when they did a biennale called Kafka Borges Biennale in Buenos Aires, that was also, he ran away from the hospital to go to Buenos Aires. He ended one of his the keynote that year asking 3 questions that modern philosophers will be working hard to find answers for. And the first question was, how could such a highly civilized society, so cultured like the German nation, commit such barbarism? Second question, how could such an ancient ethnic nation, národ, he said nation, like the Jews, allow themselves to become the victim, especially in light of all the diaspora as part of their experience? And the third question was, how could the world stand by and look on? I think we can ask the same questions for many things that are going on today. Mm-hmm. And they are questions for modern philosophers. So that's what we do when we go to schools and do our stuff.
That's fantastic.
Well, what to add?
We don't see the trailers?
No. I think we can present it as a gift for next time to make the whole screening of the whole movies. Trailers are nice, short, but not complete. And our evening is still not complete. I promised you to have a space for your own questions. Although I have some of my own, I do not want to have the whole space for myself. So please, you can make sip of water. We will think about what we want to ask, and I can moderate it. We have a microphone here.
No.
No? Okay. Or
No
I can.
microphone.
He's had it.
Okay. We have a microphone. That's true.
Yes, you are.
We have a TV. We have a phone, and we can still talk. I think it's still the best way of entertainment. So, please, there are teachers in our audience. There are people who also take care of their family stories. There are people who are very interested in topics that were discussed today, and now the stage is yours. Yes.
Já bych se chtěl zeptat, proč ta matka skrývala tu historii.
Ano. Okay.
Jestli už se to třeba odhadlo.
The question is why do you think your mother didn't want to speak about the past, was hiding that part of her life and family story?
What I've learned several things in all of these years of research, and one is about childhood trauma. Back then, there wasn't an appreciation of what happens, in times of war when you separate children, from their families, from their parents, and how traumatic that can be, for children. There's a new book that just came out by a professor in England, and it's called The Other Side of the Kindertransport Story, or The Dark Side of the Kindertransport Story. Because usually when you hear up until now about the Kindertransport, it's always the positive stories of, I was embraced by my foster family. They raised me like their own. They were like second parents to me. My mom, my mother, and her younger sister did not have a positive experience. And I kept this out of the film because I knew I wanted to share in schools. But when I did interview the relatives in England, they actually made me turn off, the recording devices and said, this is for your ears only, and we don't want you telling anyone about this. And of course, I'm telling lots of people about this now. But they think my mom was being sexually abused at one of the schools because she kept running away. And the police would have to bring her back. And she also, for the educators in the room, you would probably know this term called an elective mute, when children stop speaking because of trauma. And she went through a period of not speaking at all. And both of these relatives who told me separately about this felt very guilty, as they should, because they didn't do anything, to intervene. And so my mom's, she survived that and stayed in England, became a midwife, and was engaged to be married, and then I think was also waiting for her parents to come and get her, like they promised. And it took until she was in her mid-20s for her to, I think, accept that they didn't survive, and that her only family, her younger sister Daisy, was in the United States, and so she asked her. It was a Cornish man, to come to the U.S., and he said absolutely not, so she broke off the engagement and came to the States. But I think she decided when she came to the U.S., it was like she had no past, and she wasn't going to speak about it, and would do, the best that she could. And that happens, that is not uncommon at all with children who have experienced that kind of trauma, not just once or twice. And the trauma of being separated like that, going to a country where you don't speak the language, you don't know the food, you don't know the culture, and she also had the responsibility of taking care of her younger sister. She was told, you're the oldest and you're responsible, for your sister, and we'll come and get you after the war. And so that's why I think it was especially hard for her not to speak about it. When she got ill, she died from Alzheimer's. And when she got the diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, and she knew, she was a nurse, and she knew, what that meant. That's the first time she agreed to let me interview her. And it did not go well. In the film, you'll hear her voice a couple times, and you'll hear some stories that she did tell me that were really lovely stories about her childhood, about her father. But she couldn't handle, I think, not speaking about something for so many years, then trying to talk about it. It was too much, and she got, upset and was crying and angry, and it didn't go well.
Good.
We can add Eva's thoughts about her mom.
Right.
Yes,
If
because
you can give me this elective mute. In fact, I haven't. Thank you. I haven't heard of elective mute, which is what my mother elected to do. So while my father wrote, not as a child, she survived, she was 17, 18. She was 17 when she survived the Holocaust. Only her sister, older sister, and her survived out of hundreds of relatives. She came from Ostrava, close to the Polish border. And so for 45 years, she didn't talk about what happened. And then in, late 80s, she started writing a book of poetry, which is this book of poems, which is called The Daughter of Olga and Leo, dcera Olgy a Lea. And so it was the same thing that you're talking about that happened to your mother. It was also an elective mute.
Yeah.
And so while her husband did everything to share through literature and lectures and teaching, and I mean, he spent his life communicating. She didn't.
Yeah.
And even though she wrote the book of poetry, it was so difficult for her to talk about it. We never talked about it with my mom. You know, that's how it was, but it's all here.
Yeah.
In fact, it's very sad and powerful, and it was translated into Slovak and English and Italian.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that's another parallel. Elective mute.
Mm-hmm.
Strong topics today, and we do not even finish yet. Thank you for your question, Yasha.
Yeah.
I saw some other eyes showing there are more questions. So probably.
Maybe you sit here because people don't see you from over there. They saw me already.
I have only a remark.
Sure.
Because I think that's the more obvious thing that people who survived Holocaust didn't speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was also my father, who was almost 90 before he wrote some memories. Until that time, he didn't speak about it. He didn't want to see films about Holocaust, nothing.
My mom was the same way. If there was anything about World War II on television, she'd leave the room. She wouldn't say anything. She would just leave the room. And I don't know if I have 3 siblings, and I don't know if they noticed, but I definitely noticed, her reaction. But at the time I wasn't thinking like, oh, what a coincidence. This is about World War II. It was just, why is she leaving the room and not saying anything? And then later you made the connection.
Well, there are more stories like that behind our audience, as far as I know. And also there is used the term conspiracy of silence when we deal with the topic of covering the experience of Holocaust. So, there are different kind of reactions, different kind of stories. I was wondering, as Karen has mentioned at the beginning, she visited Brno 3 times or something. I'm really bad in mathematics, but this I'm able to count. How is it? What kind of feelings do you have when you visit these places which were previously unknown to you? And now you read, well, in Brno was this street, there lived your grandparents, this house, that's the place. I can hardly imagine, but can you share?
Because it did have a huge, the first time I was here for the symposium for George Plachek, they took us on a tour. And they would say, the person, running this tour would say, oh, and this is a house that the Placheks owned, and here's another building, and the Placheks used to live here, and then this is another. And I felt myself getting like angrier and angrier, but it took me a while to sort it out, because it was intense, and I think part of it was the kind of like cavalier attitude, here's one that they owned, here's another one that they owned, and this was taken from that, but also it was later, it was like after I got back to the States, I realized what I wanted was an apology. I wanted someone to say, we're so sorry about what happened to your family. It's horrible what happened to those 24 members who were all murdered, That's what I wanted. And then later knew I was never going to get that. And I even talked with young people because now I have friends here, and I love having friends of all ages. In fact, the mom of Adam is here in the audience, Ivanka. Adam helped, her son helped. He teaches English, and he helped with translations. And I would have these conversations with Adam and his sister about this. And I said, help me make sense of this, and they just were saying that, like, don't expect that because it's not going to, it's not going to happen. And instead, focus more on trying to connect with people who really care about your family. And I have found that very much with the Jewish community of Brno here, that, and I have felt with the students in these high schools who, they connect and they're not afraid to share emotions. And I told the students even this morning, when I share all of this with American students, the Jewish students will be very interested, and they will sometimes say, like, oh yes, and I have relatives, etc. If there aren't Jewish students, a typical American student might be intellectually interested as a historical event. But there's not any compassion, there's not any empathy of, wow, like there is, and I would ask, I asked 3 questions before I show the film when I'm with students, and I have a PowerPoint presentation. The first thing I ask is, how old were you when you first learned about the Holocaust? What were you told? And what was the impact on you? And I have them first talk to each other, and then they have to share. And I've heard everything, ranging from like age 5 up until not until I was in school. A teacher told me the first time, a lot of times it's relative, my grandmother told me about this. And then I say, and what was the impact? And they are very rapid, in touch with their feelings, and will say, it was horrible. I had nightmares. I had nightmares about it, or I felt terrible. I couldn't believe this happened in my country. And when people ask, or I know they will be asking when I go back to the U.S., so what was it like? I already know. There was a connection here that I feel with the students that I have not. I did not feel this in Berlin with the college students, and not in England. It was much more intellectually interested. Isn't this? Oh, how fascinating! But not any. Like, oh my gosh, this was horrible. And so when I first saw all the places that the Plotchiks own, and even my mom's house, and the factory. When we were there in 2005, it's the first time they let any descendants of the Plotchiks behind the gates. They had never allowed any. And because they were afraid that we'd say, like, hello.
It's ours.
Yeah. And so even though no one was interested in that. Also, ironically, in 2005, the textile factory was making textiles for American Airlines, Canada Airlines, can't remember the third airline, and it was like, wow, okay, But my mom came, that was her first time back since she was put on the train in 2005. She wasn't going to come, and at the last minute she decided to come. And I have a photograph of her face in the factory, and she looks so angry. She, of course, didn't say anything, but you could just see how angry she looked. And like I said, she wasn't talking a lot, even on that trip. But I was so glad that she did come, and she got her diagnosis as soon as she returned to the States. And I think she knew that was coming, even though she hadn't told any of us that she even got evaluated. But I think it explained why at the last minute she decided, to come.
I have a question. And that is that my mother got a diagnosis of a horrible neurological disease called Binswanger syndrome after she came back to the Czechoslovakia after the exile of 21 years in 1989, after the Velvet Revolution. Coming back to this country triggered her disease, which got progressively worse over 20 years. And I'm wondering whether your mother's coming to this country could have triggered the onset or the more rapid progression of the disease.
Yeah. Wow.
In my mother's case, she didn't want to ever come to a country where she lost everyone she dearly loved. She wanted to make her life in Israel. She wasn't able to because of her love for my father. So she sacrificed her love of Israel for the love of Arnošta Lustiga, and she did that twice. Once after she joined the Haganah in 1948, but they got married in Israel, and then they came back here because he did not want to live in Israel. He wanted to be here because this was his home. And the second time was in 1968 after the Soviet invasion. And so that's all. It's just the question about the trigger of the disease coming to a place that is so traumatic that you've got the silence.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, that makes sense to me in a way, because the first thing she lost in the progression was language. And
she did not want to talk.
Yeah,
she didn't want to communicate.
And then when she wanted to, she couldn't. But that's interesting. I never thought about that before. But I think there really might be a tie to that.
I've got another question about the apology. Unless there are other questions from here, because I can ask you that later.
They know the stage is open. Yeah. So whenever you want to ask, you
Já
can
se
ask.
chci zeptat, paní Karen, vaše teta ještě žije, to za prvé, to znamená teda od maminky sestra, a jak se na to dívá ona, jestli se dívá stejnýma očima, protože vlastně to vypadá, že se jako by dřív dala, takže možná jako byla třeba jako by šťastnější, nebo tím, že byla mladší, třeba to víc vytěsnila. Jak vy to takhle vidíte, nebo
Okay. Is your Aunt Daisy still alive?
No, Daisy? No, she died in a terrible car accident in 1996, and it was horrible. You can imagine what that meant to my mom. They were very, very close, and I saw my cousins, at the memorial, and it was only when I told them that I was making this film that they told me that when their mom died, they couldn't fill out her death certificate. They didn't know where she was born, and they didn't know the name of her parents. They knew she was from Czechoslovakia. They didn't know the town, and so they had to call my mom, and my mom helped them fill out the death certificate. In 2021, when I knew this was going to be a film, but it wasn't finished, I contacted them because I wanted to tell them I'm making this film. It's about our mothers. And the first thing I asked was, did your mom ever talk about her childhood? And they said, no, not at all. And they shared how they couldn't fill out the death certificate. But they also didn't know about her. They didn't know about the Kindertransport. And they didn't know they knew my mom and I had cleaned out the apartment Hans and Marianne's apartment. But they didn't know everything. They had no idea what we found. And so they're so grateful to have all this knowledge and understanding, and they feel like they know, and they feel closer to their mom. I also feel closer to my mom, having done this. I feel very close to these grandparents that I've never met, because during the learning what was in their letters, and you've heard me say this, and I say it in the film, I heard their voices. I hear their voices from these letters. They're incredibly powerful. And so I feel a closeness to grandparents I never met. I feel a closeness to my mom that I didn't have while she was alive, because I understand so much more, what she went through and why she hid so much. And in many ways, that's a gift. It really is. And the other thing I like to say to students, when I remember to, is if after seeing all of this and hearing this story, some students will ask, do you have any regrets? And I say my biggest regret is that I didn't ask more questions like of Hans when he wanted to tell me things, you know, when relatives were alive who would talk, that I was too busy, you know, with my children, with my job, with whatever. And I said, so if you're thinking of one of your relatives, maybe you have a grandmother, maybe you have a great aunt, and you're thinking about them right now and thinking, well, maybe I should ask them some questions. I said, do it, you know, while they're alive, because it's worth it. And if you don't know about their lives, ask about it and then listen to what they say. And you know, it could be a really wonderful thing. So I'm saying that to all of you as well. If you're thinking about somebody right now, that you feel like I should give them some time, I should ask some questions, do it while they're around to answer.
Everything is safe. It's okay. It was like a bell. You have 5 more minutes.
Oh my goodness.
It runs quickly.
Yes, it does.
I know. Still, I don't want to cut anybody.
It's interesting now that, because I was thinking about the fact that Eva was talking, I want to film my father because of the, I mean, she didn't say it, but it was a message of him alive. I mean, it was the transmission of life, and he was connected with I think not with seeing him, but more with the live communication, which is not only speaking, but also how he was moving, the expressions and everything. I mean, he was very expressive, I think, as Eva is. And I was studying. But Karen had only the silence. And it's interesting that at the end, although you say, okay, I write a book and something like this, but at the end, this personification, although if you didn't met your relative, your grandfather, your mother, somehow you, at the end, you were speaking with them. And I'm thinking about this thing on 2 levels. One is more politics. I mean, I think that everyone who wants to manipulate with others just wants silence. And what a lot of the work is doing is to have silence. And maybe not everybody will agree here, but in this time, I say a lot speaking about fake news, and so much, and I'm telling him, okay, it's bad to hear something that is not the truth, but on the other side, silence is worst. Okay, and this one thing. But okay, to come back here, is that yes. Why do you think that I mean, do you think that there is something related with what I was telling? That you, at the end, also if you never planned to make a movie, at the end you did it. Although both are already concerned with documents, with education, but for example, a movie is not only a document, is it? It's art. I mean, so if you can maybe more work on it. I mean, this idea. Why do you think that you get this impulse? To write a book is not enough. Such.
we got this hero over here.
Yeah, maybe. Well, can you answer how you saw very early on, or why you saw early on that it was a film when I did not at all.
Well, I was trained as a filmmaker in college. That's what so I see the world in a visual way. So not just that film, just everyday life. I see things in a visual way and I express myself into it. So as a visual artist, when you get information, you start to say, okay, how can I put this together to tell a story? And I still think she should do a book. So I think the two can coexist, in the same space. But for me, it's the way I see the world.
And in fact, my film does have a book of complete dialogues from the filming, because into 53 minutes you can't squeeze in, 20 hours of shooting. So you have to do a book.
Oh yeah. Well,
there's no question.
But here's when you say that too, you can't squeeze 56 minutes. First of all, we filmed over 200 hours, and what is in the film is 63 minutes. So when you hear that 99% is on the cutting room floor, it is. And when students or other people in the audience will say, like, why didn't you include the part about what happened to your mother after, it's like, oh, I did. The editor cut it. Or, why didn't you include the part about the rat? I did. And the editor cut it. There's a lot there. But the other thing that was really painful for me was the editing of the film. We did it during the pandemic. And Jeff did a rough cut of the film from 200 hours, and it was 3.5 hours, which is way too long still. But he gave that to the editor, and the editor said, we're going to get this, to an hour. And every time, first of all, Armin wrote 50, well now 57, but 50 letters, and what's in the film are excerpts from 10. Herta, my grandmother, wrote 35 letters. What you hear in the film are excerpts from 6. And so we had included more letters, and then the editor was cutting them, saying, we have to cut Karen, we've got to cut more of Armin. And at one point, I started crying, and, I think hung up on Zoom, and was saying, in my apartment by myself, I'm not doing this. Because the whole point for me was I wanted people to hear their voices, and if they keep cutting it, if Tal, the editor, keeps cutting it, I don't want to do this. And then Tal and Jeff figured out what to say to me, which was, you can have it in the curriculum. You can put everything into the curriculum. And so I then, eventually I would stop crying and say, okay, I'll do that. And sometimes when they wanted to cut really good letters, they'd say, it's going to go in your curriculum. And it's like, oh, yeah, everything is.
But why not in an audiobook?
Well, that's an idea too.
Of course, there are lots of ideas here because you've got an incredible legacy.
Yes,
it should not end up on the floor.
I know, right?
That's basically,
I know. So, I've had a couple different people ask if they could collaborate to help me write a book. And one professor actually wants to write a grant. And she said, I'd love to do almost like a coffee table book and include all of your grandparents' letters.
What's a coffee table book?
Like an art book. That you, in America, it's like, those big fancy books that you have on your table to look impressive, and then you put hors d'oeuvres on top of them. But we call them coffee table books. They're art books. Giant, heavy, expensive ones.
You've got a question there.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Já tady přijdu trošku a já chci hrozně té osobě poděkovat. Já jsem taky proživší a jsem proživší holokaustu Varšava.
Yeah, Anita is our friend. She wants to thank you, hugely thank you. She's a survivor of Warsaw.
Žiju v Brně 10 let. Přijela jsem prostě ze Slezska, kde jsme utekli z Varšavy a byla jsem tam zachovaná, uchovaná. Spoustu věcí, které jste řekla, tak jsem prožila.
So she has been living in Brno for 10 years, and a lot of topics you spoke about, she went through, or she lived like that.
A prostě, když jsem přišla do Brna, tak přijít z rozbouřené, úplně zničené Varšavy do Brna, kde je tolik památek a tolik živých osob, které to pamatují a nemůžou říct. A vy jste tady semínko, které prostě rozdmíchává to, co spí.
People who are silent, there are plenty of them in Brno, and you came as a seed to make it arise, to make it happen. That's what she felt.
Oh, thank you.
A vím, že jste boží rukou.
Oh, okay. You are in the God's hand.
Thank you. Děkuji.
I have also some gifts. They brought us a lot of gifts today, so I didn't think about flowers because I know you travel a lot. But as we spoke about the family legacies and roots, so here I have 2 trees for you.
I have no idea what Táňa is giving us. Wow.
Oh, trees.
It's just the family tree, the tree of life.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Just a symbol. I will have you later.
Wow. That's a very original gift.
Yeah.
Have you ever gotten a tree before?
I have not.
Same here.
It's a small tree, but with a big symbol.
Yes. Yeah.
It had to happen in Brno.
Of course, and that happens here only because of you, because you came. You shared your hearts, your minds with us. Your thoughts were very deep today, and I thank each of us here that we could spend the time together. Thanks for your patience. And I'm sure it's not the last time. It's always very difficult to say goodbye, but we have a lot of plans. So, finger crossed to all of our books and plans.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you
Yes,
to this
Táňa,
wonderful center.
Yes, and Martin arranging all of this too.
Thank you for welcoming us.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to you for fantastic moderation as always.
Maybe some technical only information. Is it possible, Karen, to see your photographs here?
Oh yeah. And oh, you know what I also brought, and you'd like to see these.
Yes.
In just in January, I was given 7 more letters of my grandfathers that I'd never seen before, and they're from France. They're written in French. And what happened was a young man contacted me in November and said, "Are you related to Armin and Herta Turkel, who had 2 daughters, Erica and Daisy, and if you are, please let us know." So I said, yes, that's my mother, Erica, and my grandparents, Armin and Herta. What is this about? And it was a young man said, I'm the grandson of Olivier dcera, and he inherited his aunt's estate 10 years ago. And in the papers and documents, they found an envelope that said, Turkel Enfant. And in the envelope are 7 letters from my grandfather, along with these 3 photographs of my mother and Daisy. Oh, thank you. And that I've never seen before. And
which one is your mom?
This one, the older one. and that's Daisy. And here they are in Vienna, and there's writing on the back. But I never had seen these, and what's amazing is the letters that I had, from Hans and Marianne's apartment were, after they put the girls on the train, one of these letters was written 4 days after Kristallnacht, and these letters weren't censored, and the way Armin's voice in these letters is different from the letters that he wrote that were censored. And he writes about anti-Semitism being awful all over the world. This is in 1938, with a boldness that I hadn't heard, from hearing his voice, and other things too. So when I saw these, some of the content, I contacted the editor of the film, because the film's going to be on national television in the U.S. on PBS public television. And we were working on the cut. We had to cut 7 minutes. And I called the editor and I said, this has just happened. And I've gotten the letters translated, and we have to put some in the film. And he said, Karen, we are cutting the film. We're not adding to it. And I said, we have to put some of these in. And he said, then what are you going to cut? And that was easy. It was like, I know exactly what to cut. It was more me.
Yes.
And because I wanted Armin's voice heard. So the new opening of the film is very different from the one that's out there. And I would love to come back and show the new film when it's ready. It's not completely done, but almost. But we also added these photographs, and we added new information too that you helped find when you at the Brno archives that you sent to me. We included some. She was very helpful too. We did some of those police posters. Yes,
I'm happy to help.
I know, but they're in there. And so anyway, that's just a recent discovery. I told the students about it this morning because one asked, are you still working and trying to learn more, or have you stopped now that the film is done? It's like, no, you know this too. It doesn't end.
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it doesn't end. And when I was sharing this last night at dinner, Eva was saying, I have goosebumps, because she also just had a very recent discovery that you're still probably processing. But we talked about, getting new information even now, and how important it is.
And I could mention that if there's another minute. Should I mention that discovery?
It was one of my questions in the pocket. And here's the time for it.
Okay, so last Thursday I had a presentation at the Charles University to students of media studies and journalism and marketing and PR. And it was in English because they're studying in English. And at the end there was a lady about, slightly younger than me, who came to me and said, I am Eva such and such, and I would like to talk to you about Dita Saxlova, who of course was the image, the person on whom my father based his first novel called Dita Saxlova. It was the first novel that he wrote with a female protagonist in 1962. He even wrote it before he wrote his Prayer for Katarina Horovicová. And so we went for coffee in Kavárna Slavia, right next door to the place to the university. And she started saying, well, Dita Saxlova was from Habry. Habry is this place quite far from Prague, but okay, it's still in Bohemia. And the lady's great-grandparents used to work at the Lustigs family as housekeepers. Apparently, the Lustig family in Habry had a lot of property, and they were very kind to their staff. Well, after the war, Dita Saxlova came back and spoke with the grandparents who used to work for the Lustig family. And she was the only survivor from the family. Everyone else died. She was a young woman of 19 years old. And then this lady with whom I'm having tea says to me, and you know, Dita Saxlova's mother married a Lustig from Habry. And so, in fact, Dita Saxlova was also a Lustig. And so I just learned that, 4 days ago. And so now I need to look at the genealogy, whether Dita Saxlova was actually a relative. And I cannot ask my father whether he knew that Dita's mother married a Lustig. And so it's like an incredible, mystery to me. There's a lot of stuff going on now. But then I said to these two ladies that somehow my whole adult life, somehow I have felt that Dita Saxova, i.e. Saxlova, was one of my sisters. And I don't have any sisters. I only have that one brother. So we'll see.
It seems like an endless
journey.
mission.
It's a journey. But I have a project idea for you. And we know that the Lev Ber family met during meeting Brno here a number of years ago. What was it? 2017.
Correct.
I think your family should come. No, just a minute.
Yeah.
I think your family, your cousins, should have the same family reunion in Brno, just like the Lev Ber family had in Brno. And that's the next chapter of your family story.
Okay. I would love to have them come. My brother has been here, but my two sisters have not. They've never been to the Czech Republic.
But meeting Brno could organize that.
Yeah.
And why not? You are from Brno, so let's work with this legacy here.
Okay.
Bring everyone together and they can learn about the roots.
It's some kind of a therapy as well. But for all of us, it's okay. I know I will go to see the movie One Life with different feelings now after our evening. And I think the time has come to say goodbye.